Hey, it's Terry and I'm back with another video. From time to time, I hear people, especially younger people, who have some limited experience programming mostly with interpreted scripting languages like Python, complain or criticize Java for being too old, bloated, and cumbersome to do even the simplest thing quickly. And guess what? They're right. Or are they? So in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can super quickly write Java code to test out ideas or premises and get immediate feedback without the bloat of starting up a full IDE and creating a project using the JShell, which has been included with the JDK since version 9. All right, so I've known about the JShell probably since it came out, but since I'm now somewhat old and occasionally set in my ways, it took me years to begin to embrace this handy little tool. And I'm certain I'm not the only one. I'm betting the vast majority of Java devs I've worked with over the years in corporate America also haven't really embraced it either. The reasons for this may be varied, but in my case, I think it may have come down to simply not taking the time to sit down with it and learn how to use it and understand what problem it was really trying to address. Which is actually kind of funny for me because I came to Java from a very productive scripting language in the 90s called Perl. So I definitely knew what it felt like to be immediately productive writing code that didn't need to be compiled or started in large projects. Anyway, here's how you can get started with the JShell. So I'm assuming that you're all running at least JDK version 9 or greater, which shouldn't be too hard considering that as of the time of this recording in late 2022, we are now on JDK version 19. JDK stands for Java Development Kit or just Java, okay? So we're in 19 now. So as long as you're running 9 or above, you will have access to the JShell. So I'm going to quickly show you how you can get started with the JShell in macOS, Windows, and Linux, okay? Starting with macOS. All right, so first off, you'll want to open up a terminal, and you can use the Spotlight search here. What is that? Command spacebar to get to the Spotlight search, and then type terminal, right? And then that will open up a window sort of like this. Now I've got it full screen and I have it customized right now with a green background. Yours likely won't be green if you've never used it before, but you will be at a command prompt. And from there, you can simply type JShell, all lowercase, return. And I am now in the JShell application that comes with the JDK. All right. Okay, and then over here in Windows, it's not too different. I will open up my start window here. And then I can type PowerShell or command. I prefer PowerShell in the Windows environment, so I'm going to type just power and then return. That opens up a command prompt, and then from here I can type JShell return. Okay, and so that's how you can start up the JShell in Windows. By the way, like I said, you don't have to use PowerShell. You could also just type CMD for command, and that should give you the little option for command prompt. And so you can open up a command prompt and do it that way as well. There you go. So now I have two instances of JShell open on Windows. And then over here in Linux, you can start up a terminal. So I'm going to come down here. Now I'm in Ubuntu Linux. There are so many flavors of Linux. Hopefully though, if you're running Linux, you probably are pretty savvy already and you know how to get to a command prompt because you usually have to get to it for all kinds of things anyway. But I'm going to open up terminal and then from here, JShell. There we go, and there's JShell. Okay, so now you know how to start up the JShell in all three of the major operating systems. Sorry, BSD users, but you know what you're doing. Okay, now I'm going to continue over here in macOS because that's my preferred OS for development work at least. Okay, so what this is a very bare bones environment in which you can immediately start entering Java code and have it execute or evaluate immediately too. This kind of programmer's environment is commonly referred to as a REPL, at least that's how I pronounce it, and stands for Read, Eval, Print, Loop. Let me show you why it's called that. So the first thing I'll do is simply output hello world like this. System.out.println hello world. I know usually they put a comma there, but I never do that. Et voila, you've got hello world printed out on the screen. So as soon as I hit enter, JShell read my line of code, evaluated it, printed out the results of the evaluation, which in this case resulted in actually printing hello world to the screen, and then went back into a mode where it's waiting for me to enter more code. Those are the steps of the REPL, read, eval, print loop. Let's take notice of several features of this example that make it immediately more productive for just trying out some basic code snippets. And by the way, these little bits of code that you type in like this actually are called snippets. So first, I didn't have to define a class or a method, and this, my friends, is huge. Any of you who've taken my Java course, see the link in the description below, should know that in standard Java, you can't execute any code at all without defining a class and a method. Well, technically, you could conceivably execute some code in a static initializer of a class, but that's basically an anonymous static method in my opinion. So anywho, you can see here that we were allowed to dispense with all of that formality and get right down to business, much like coders of more straightforward scripting languages like Python. So let's try out some more examples. Let's do a little bit of math. So we'll do a simple math problem like 5 plus 3, enter, and you get an immediate result of 8. And we'll do a little bit more, 5 plus 3 times 2, 11. 5 plus 3 times 2, 16. Okay, so that's all working pretty much as you might expect it to, except that you didn't have to explicitly write a program to get those results. It's evaluating these expressions in real time, and again, that's just the benefit of using a REPL. Now, I want to draw your attention to a few interesting things here. First off, notice these little $ numbers here. These are actually dynamically generated variables that are capturing the results of our evaluated expressions. Okay, so in other words, it's just holding on to the answers that we're getting. So JShell generates these automatically for any output from your expressions or method calls or whatever. And we can actually use these to refer back to those values with more code. So let me show you what I mean here. If I do another system.out.println $2, it prints 8, which is the value that was stored in that variable, $2. Now, if I want to see what's in 3 and 4, I can re-execute this command. And so let me go ahead and just show you right now a couple of keyboard shortcuts that will come in very handy while you're working in JShell, okay? So if you hit the up arrow key, that will actually recall the previous command or statement or whatever you just typed in JShell. And if you keep hitting the up arrow key, it'll keep going farther back in your history of commands and statements, okay? Like so. Now you can also go the opposite direction by hitting the down arrow. So now you're getting back to more recently executed expressions and statements. So now I'm back here on this print line, and I can use my arrow key and come over here and replace that 2 with a 3, and there's 11, and then I can hit up arrow again and replace that 3 with a 4, and there's 16, okay? So that's a few of the shortcuts that exist in JShell. And now let me take a quick moment to plug another course that I have. So I've got another course besides Java, and it's actually called Essential Unix Skills for Developers. Now, why would I go and make a course like that? Well, it's actually because of things like this. As you become more engaged as a developer, you will encounter more and more situations like this one where your development tools or language or processes are heavily being influenced by Unix. Now, what do I mean here? Well, it just so happens that being able to use the up and down arrow keys like this is actually being borrowed by JShell from Unix shell prompts, okay? Namely the bash shell. Anyone who's generally familiar with Unix and the command line will recognize these keyboard shortcuts. And these aren't the only shortcuts that exist within the JShell. Let me just show you, in fact. if I bring up the help with a /help, and by the way, so / is the way that you can call up a lot of the JShell commands, okay? All right, so here we are. And then if I do help space keys, and now you can see a lot of the shortcuts that exist for use in the JShell. Let me scroll up a little bit, make sure I'm not missing a few here. So the ones that are relevant to skills that you would have learned in Unix would be these ones here, Control L, U, T, X, X, all of this stuff, okay? So these are all generally the same keyboard shortcuts that you can use in a typical Unix shell like Bash or Z shell, okay? So that's really actually quite nice that your skills from Unix transfer really well. And these will be generally the same in the JShell running in Windows and the JShell running in Linux as well, okay? So now let's get back to the programming and especially the math real quick, okay? So as a Java developer, you may already realize that you can, of course, raise values to other powers by using a function on the math class, right? But let's pretend like you do remember that you need the math class because it's math and that's easy to remember, but you're not exactly remembering precisely what the name of the function or method is, right? So what you could do is type math like this, period, and then you can hit the tab key. And look what we get here. We get a bunch of suggestions of methods that exist on the math class. Now I see at least two constants as well for pi and e. Okay, so anyway, so if you didn't remember what method you needed to use to raise something to a power, you could kind of start going through here, and there we go. There's POW, that's power, right? And then you could start typing P, like so, and then you could hit tab again, and look at that, you get an auto completion. Now let's also say though that, okay, now I found the method, but I don't remember which number goes first, the number that I want to raise the power to or the power, right? Well, if you hit tab again, look at this. Now you get a little bit more information. However, this still isn't enough. It's just telling us that this method takes two arguments, both of type double. So then if I hit tab yet again, well, now I get basically the Java documentation or Java docs for this method. And then I can read right here, returns the value of the first argument raised to the power of the second argument. Okay, so in other words, you've got some really nice access to online help of the Java docs for the methods and classes of Java. And so that's actually quite helpful. It's not entirely unlike some of the auto-completion and suggestions that you would have gotten in a fully fledged IDE like IntelliJ or Eclipse. All right, so let's proceed with this. So let's square the number 5. 5, 2, like so. And there we go. The answer is 25, and it is stored in a temporary variable called 8. Okay, so now let's return back to our original Hello World printout, okay? And I want to show you another way that we could get to it. So one way that we could get to it is to hit the up arrow. However, that has already been, at this point, several commands ago. And so you may not want to have to sit there and hit the up arrow a zillion times. So let me show you another way that you could actually search through your history for previously entered commands, and that is with the Control R. And again, this is 100% completely and totally borrowed from Unix shells. So I just did a Control R, and now you see this BCKI search. What that's saying is backward search, okay? And what that is implying is a backward search, okay? So I will search backward through my history. And now if I type anything at all that was included on any of the lines where I did the hello world output, this will find those commands and bring them to the front. Okay, so if I type WOR, for example, for world, look at that. It's showing me that line right there. Now, if I wanted to re-execute this line right now, I could just hit return and then it executes that again. But what if I want to change it rather than re-execute it? So I'm going to do Control R again, and this time I will type PRI for print. Okay, so that also found my match. Okay, and then, like I said, if I want to just change this text from Hello World to something else, well, I can jump to the end of this line. I can either use my cursor and start moving left and right, or I can use another common Unix shortcut, which is Control E to jump to the end of the line, Control E. And now I'm at the end of the line, and the backward searching prompt went away, right? Because it now knows, okay, you want to take it over from here. Okay, so then I can move back and get rid of this. Now I can use a few other keyboard shortcuts, and you can go look up these shortcuts. I've already shown you how to find them, but one thing that I could do, for example, from where my cursor currently is to delete the world and then the hello with a Control W. So this Control W will just delete all of the letters to the left of the cursor up until it encounters a space or at least a non-word character. So if I want to get rid of the hello, there we go. And now I'm back at the quotes, okay? So then I can say something else. This is another bit of text, okay? And then I can hit return. Now notice, I'm not needing to move my cursor to the end of this line either. My cursor can be anywhere on this line when I hit return. In fact, I could move my cursor to the beginning of the line in one jump with a Control A. That moves to the beginning of the line, and I could hit return, and then that executes that command, okay? So we've got Control R, and that allows us to search for previous commands, right? We've got a Control A that jumps to the beginning of the line, Control E that jumps to the end of the line, okay? Now we've also got Control C if I just want to abandon that command without executing it. Again, these are all keyboard shortcuts that are extremely common with Unix operating system and command prompts. Let's see, in addition to searching backward through my history with Control R, let me do this again. I will do a print line, okay? Now, well, actually, before I get to the next step, what if I wanted to search farther back in history for other instances where I used the print line method, okay? So I've just done a Control R and then I typed in PRIN. But what if this particular expression isn't the one that I want to execute and I'm looking for another one? Well, in that case, if I want to keep searching for that same match, I can just do Control R again, right? And so there's the previous one before that, and then one before that. Remember these? And Control R before that, and so on and so forth, okay? So you can continue to just do Control R to go backward. Now, if I want to go forward in my history, I can do that too, Control S. So that's taking me back forward, okay? So Control R to search backward in my history, and then Control S to search forward in my history. Now, there's one thing that any of you who do have some experience with modern scripting languages like Python may be thinking here. Yes, Terry, this does certainly look more efficient for me to just try out some Java, but look at the fact that you still have to type system.out.println just to print a simple bloody message. And you are right, that is not cool. However, the creators of Java, who are Oracle, by the way, they've thought of this criticism and they've given us a nice little shortcut to not have to be so ridiculous. And by the way, for those of you who have not learned Java formally yet, let me just explain. This is the formal way that you would typically print things out. And the reason for that is because Java is a relatively strict object-oriented programming language. And as such, it is so strict that we don't have functions per se. We only have methods. What's the difference between a method and a function? The difference is basically that methods are functions that live inside of a class or an object, okay? And so in Java, with it being a relatively strict object-oriented programming language, you cannot have a function or a method outside of a class or an object, okay? And I'm saying class or object because they are two sides of the same coin. A class is the blueprint for how to build the object, okay? You define the methods on the class, but then they exist in the object itself, okay? It's kind of like a blueprint for a house. You've got the blueprint for the house, and then you build the house. On the blueprint, you've got rooms like a bathroom. In the actual built house, you've got rooms like the bathroom, okay? So that's why you may hear me interchangeably talk about classes and objects as if they're essentially the same thing. They're not, but they have a lot in common because they both share methods, okay? So anyway, sorry about that little tangent there. So formally, you cannot have a println method or function without it being connected to a class or an object, okay? So in this case, system is the name of a class, and then out is the name of an object that always exists on that class, okay? And then finally, println is the method. However, Java does allow for something called static imports, which is where we can simply tell Java, hey, I would like to be able to refer to this method println without having to specify the object and or class that it is a member of, okay? So it will become statically imported. And you can do that because println is actually a static method, okay? So this little shortcut, though, that Oracle has given us in the JShell allows us to basically do a bunch of imports all in one fell swoop because they've already predefined them for us. Unfortunately, in my opinion, they don't default the JShell to this behavior, though, but they do give it to us. So let me show you a few ways that you can turn this on. So you can first just type /open to open up a script, essentially. And they give us a default script for doing exactly this functionality, and that script is called printing. I don't have to specify where this script is because it's kind of like in the in the universal place where JShell knows about these built-in scripts, okay? So if I simply do /open printing like so, now I can actually refer to not just the println method, but many of the most common print related methods, okay? So there's a printf, for example, hello $S. And any of you who are familiar with printf from just about every modern programming language in the world for the last 50 years should understand what I'm basically doing here. Now, I will use a slight variation, though, with the %n rather than what most of you might be more familiar with, which is a \n, but they do the same thing. Well, actually, I guess I could leave it with the \n, in fact, okay? Terry. I don't know how to spell my own name. There you go. And so the printf does what you would expect it to do. And now look how much more concise it is to just do a quick hello world, right? So now you can just do the regular hello world. All right. And now that makes Java in the JShell that much less painful, right? Now, there's a couple of issues with this approach, though, of importing these static imports for the print methods. Doing it this way with the /open printing does do what we want. However, if I exit out of the JShell and then come back into it again, this behavior won't be sticky, right? It won't be there anymore. I'll have to do this every single time. If you don't want to have to do that every single time, there is a way to make it permanent, okay? And so let me show you that real quick. You'll use another command, which is set start default space printing. Oh, and actually I forgot one thing myself. I'm going to show you another keyboard shortcut here because I want to move my cursor back before the word default. I'm going to hold down on my Option or Alt key, Option B, to back up by one whole word, okay? And then I do it again, and now I'm right on default here. And I'm going to issue one little option here, which is called retain, and that's really important there, okay? So what I am telling JShell now is that whenever JShell starts up, I would like it to remember to load up two scripts. The first script is called the default script. The default script runs by default. However, if you modify what scripts should start up with the JShell and you don't explicitly mention default, you will lose the default, okay? And we don't really want to lose that because that is also importing some really useful functionality, okay? So if you're going to override the startup script and retain it by telling it to open up printing or some other custom script that you wrote, you'll probably want to explicitly also specify the default, okay? So now if I execute that, and if I were now to exit out of the JShell and then come back in fact, here, I guess I will just do it. And I just typed exit. I do that all the time. Exit on its own won't work. Most of the commands require a /. Okay, so /exit. Okay, so now I'm back on the command prompt, okay? And then I can go back in. Notice how I just typed the up arrow just to prove the fact that these keyboard shortcuts are originally Unix shortcuts. They're all the same. Control A, Control E, so on and so forth. I can even do the Control R and search back through my history. I'll Like there's awk and stuff. Okay, so anyway, there's JShell, enter. And now I can just get right to business. Print hello world, like so. Okay. All right, so now let me show you a few other things that you can do with the JShell. All we've done is like the most basic things, but we can go a little bit more deep than that. Let's create a method. So we can create methods, and one of the beautiful things about the JShell now, I was just giving this whole little tangent a bit ago where I was saying that in formal Java, you cannot have methods without them being defined within the context of a class. However, in the JShell, you can define methods. It's basically like you can imagine that the JShell environment itself is a default class, okay? And in fact, I'm pretty sure that's basically how they will have implemented this, okay? And so it's ready for us to start defining methods at any moment, okay? So let's create an add method to add two numbers together, okay? And basically the same code that you would typically write in a more formal IDE or whatever for Java is the code that you would write here, okay? So we have to decide on, will there be a return type for this method? And yeah, let's have it return an integer, okay? And it's gonna be called add, and it's gonna take two inputs, num1 of type integer and num2 of type integer. And then I can create a opening curly brace. Now watch this. When I hit return, look at the three ellipses there and then the greater sign. So it knows that I'm now defining the body of this method, and so it has automatically indented, which is kind of cool. And then I can say like I want to return num1 plus num2 semicolon, and then return like that. And then I can close off this method with a closing curly brace. And look at that, it matched this closing curly brace to the opening brace, and then realized, okay, let me unindent now to close off everything. And then when I hit return, watch this. It gives me a little feedback telling me, hey, I created the method called add that takes two integers, okay? And now I can start using that method right away. So I can type add 5, 3, like that, and return. And look at that, I get my answer of 8. And then I can recall that method again and execute it again with an up arrow key and change these values to whatever, 52 and 34. 86, okay? So you get the idea. Now let's say that I want to rename that method quickly. So I could simply hit the up arrow a few times. Now watch this. So now see what it just did there? It just brought back that entire method. And now from here, if I hit up arrow, I can actually just move right into this method and redefine it right here, okay? So maybe I call it add-er, okay? Actually, that's not a good name though, because typically methods should be named after verbs or actions, right? So I don't know. How about do adding, okay? And then notice now that I was able to simply hit return, and it went ahead and created a new method now called do adding. So I now have two methods, okay, that do the exact same thing. I didn't destroy the previous method. It just built another method or created another method, okay? And by the way, if we do a /help and see what all we can do here, and I scroll up a little bit, you'll see here that we have access to be able to look at all kinds of things. So for example, right here, there is a /methods command, okay? And this will list the declared methods and their signatures. So let's try that, /methods. Okay, so here are all of those print methods that basically got statically imported into the environment here. And then here are our two custom methods now, add and do adding, right? So that's just proving that I didn't override the original add method. It just added a new do adding method, okay? So let me recall the do adding method again. Now let's say that I wanted to add another line into the body of this method. So before it returns the value there, the sum, maybe it prints a little message out on the screen or something like that, okay? Well, if I try to do that here. The problem is that I need to make a new line, and there isn't an easy way, or at least I'm not aware of an easy way to do that within the JShell. I can modify what's already there, but I don't know how to add a new line. Now, I guess I could put a semicolon here and then just start typing some more stuff, because it's really the semicolon that actually adds an additional, expression or statement or whatever to be executed. And so you could have lots of those all on the same line. However, it would look really bad, right? So that's one thing you could do. However, there's a better way. Let me do a Control-C to just break out of that. So first off, let me show you something here. I'm going to bring up the help again and scroll up here. And my goal is to be able to edit that method and add a new line to it, okay? So let me show you a few of the steps that you can go through to be able to do this more effectively, all right? So first off, you'll want to get back to that particular snippet of code, okay? Which in this case is that entire method. So one way to do that would be to first list out all of the snippets of code that you have, that you've written, okay? And you can do that with this /list, okay? So let's do a /list. All right, and so what you see here are these snippets of code. Number 2 is where we defined the add method, okay? And then number 5 is where we defined the doAdding method, okay? So now, having done that, if I scroll back up again, I will show you another command, and it is the /edit command, which takes a name or an ID, okay? So I could say /edit, doAdding, or I could say /edit 5, okay? So let's try that and see what happens. /edit 5. And by the way, I don't even have to type out that full edit. I could just type enough to disambiguate for JShell what command must I be referring to. So you don't even have to type everything out all the way, okay? So I can just do /ed and then 5. And look at what just happened here. It opened up this little editor with that method in it, and now I can just, do any kind of editing that I want to do right here, okay? Now this is a very bare bones, super not very cool text editor. In fact, I might even argue that editing, or at least creating new code in the command line JShell is in some ways better than here, because over here, I don't even have access to any suggestions or auto-completion or any of that kind of stuff, okay? So this is not my preferred way to do editing. So let me show you another way. To get out of this, I can just do a cancel. All right, so I'm back over here again. Now, another way that I can do this editing is that I can actually define my own preferred editor, okay? And so I can use the set command here, set editor, and then the name of a binary or an application on my system that I want it to launch. So I could just say VI, for example, or Vim. Well, these days, VI always points to Vim, okay? And for those of you who are not Unix users, just know that VI is basically the Swiss Army knife basic text editor that is almost always installed on virtually every Unix system in the world, okay? All right, so I've set my editor now to VI. So then, if I recall that edit command again, watch this. Hey, look at that. Now I'm in VI, which is at least a way better environment to do a little bit of snippet editing, right? So I can make a new line here, and let's see. And let's say I want to print line output is coming now. Get out of that. And by the way, again, if you want to understand how I'm even editing in VI or lots of other Unix stuff, check out my Unix course, link in the description below. All right, so I'm going to save this and quit. And now look at this, I get a message telling me modified method doAdding, okay? And so now, if I do a list, you can see that my doAdding method now has that extra little code there, and I can go ahead and execute this now. doAdding, and notice here I just hit tab to get auto completion there, right? And I will specify some numbers, and now I get this new behavior of that it's printing out my little message right there. All right, just a couple more things I want to show you real quickly now. So you've seen me now create a method, and of course you can create classes the same as you would in a full-fledged IDE. I'm not going to create a whole entire class because it's too bloated and I don't care to get into all of that, but I will quickly create a lightweight class, which as of Java, I think version 9 or something, those are called records, right? So records are a very lightweight form of a class, essentially. So let's create a record instead of a class. We'll call it person, and it will just hold a couple of properties of a person, like a string for the first name and a string for the last name, like so. Okay, so now I have defined a person class or record, okay? And then I can write a little bit of code to do something with it. So let's create an array list, okay? So I'm gonna first create a variable to hold on to my array list, and this will be an array list of people, okay? So I'm coding to the interface though. So even though you're hearing me talk about an array list, I'm about to first define a variable that's going to hold on to the array list or reference the array list. And that variable is actually going to be of type list, which is the interface of array list. Okay. So let's call it people equals new array list, like so. Okay. And so now I can start creating people and adding them into this list. People.add new person. And I will add myself. And also notice now, whenever I have these matchable curly braces or parentheses or whatever, as I type those characters, the cursor shows me the match for that. So that way I can make sure that I'm closing off these elements properly, which you will be familiar with from any modern IDE as well. Okay, so I will add myself. There we go. And let's add a few more. Let's see, let's add some movie stars. Tom Cruise. And who's another movie star? Well, I guess Nicole Kidman. Okay, and I guess that's enough. And so now I can call methods on the array list like you would expect to be able to do. So I can say something like people.size, right? And I can hit tab there to autocomplete that, and there you go. You have 3 people in there, right? And then let's do something a little more involved, but not too much more. Let's use like the Streams API and do some you know, a little bit of functional programming stuff here. So we'll do something like people.stream, and let's do a for each, and let's for each person, let's do a print line P. There you go. And so I just printed out all of the people who were in that array list, right? Okay, so I think you probably hopefully are getting the gist here that if you just want to try out some snippets of Java code really quickly to make sure that you understand an API, or want to just experiment like, what would happen if I did this, this, and this? It is so much quicker to just open up a terminal prompt or shell prompt or whatever, type JShell, start it up, and go to town. It's much, much quicker in many cases to do it this way than to have to take the time to fire up an entire IDE. As much as I love IntelliJ still takes a while to kind of open up, right? And then from there, you typically end up having to create a new project, and that's a whole thing, going through the wizard and all of that, right? And all you want to do is just test your knowledge of how do regular expressions work, or you know, whatever, right? Things like what you just saw me do here, right? And they could be simple things like this or much more involved experiments, okay? And there's so much more functionality to this thing that, you know, I'm almost going, well, for me, it's almost like at 50 minutes, although hopefully I will edit this down to something closer to 30 minutes. But there's so much more functionality that I just can't take the time in this one video to show you, but I think you get the idea. So make sure that you do explore /help to see what all you can do in here, okay? And then a lot of these commands take additional arguments, okay? So you can drill in more with that help to find out list of what, right? Things like that. But there's so much here. You can save these scripts and things as you're typing all this stuff in, right? There's a save there, for example. And we already saw the open. Okay, so I think you get the basic gist, okay? And let me just remind you again, if any of what you saw me doing here kind of made you scratch your head and you wondered, I didn't know that you could do X, Y, or Z besides the JShell stuff, you may want to seriously consider purchasing my Java course, which is for absolute beginners, though even people who do know other programming languages have commented to me that they've learned quite a lot from my course. So I've got my Java course, and then I've already mentioned I also have a Unix course. And seriously, if you're interested in trying to become a professional developer, if you're not already one, and you're going to be in the business for a while, you're going to need to come to terms with Unix if you aren't already. Just about everything we do in modern development touches on Unix skills, commands, languages, things like you just saw here. If you use GitHub to store your code and you want to use the git command on the command line, Git was created by Linus Torvalds, who created Linux, who is a Unix guy. He created it so that his own team could better work on the Linux kernel throughout the world. So it is very Unix-centric, okay? It works on Windows, but it's very Unix-centric. Most of these programming tools and languages and commands, in fact, were typically developed in a Unix-like environment first. So you're not going to be able to escape touching or being affected by Unix one way or the other. And when I say Unix, I'm referring to true Unix, Mac OS, which technically is a true Unix because they paid for the right to call it Unix, and Linux, which is technically not a valid Unix because they did not pay for the right, nor does it use any of the official Unix code. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. So check out my links in the description below to go purchase any and all of my courses, okay? And with that, I will sign off and see you in the next one.